Israel and Palestinian war. Is this the last days? The current conflict between Israel and Palestine is a complex geopolitical issue rooted in decades of territorial, political, and religious disputes. While it is a significant event, whether it signals the last days is subject to interpretation, depending on one's beliefs or worldview. Biblical perspectives. Some Christian eschatological views interpret conflicts in the Middle East, particularly involving Israel, as fulfilling prophecies related to the end times, described in the Bible, e.g., in the books of Daniel, Ezekiel, or Revelation. For example, Israel's role. Many believe Israel plays a central role in end-time prophecy as a nation restored after millennia, as seen in its modern establishment in 1948. Wars and rumors of wars. Passages like Matthew chapter 24 verse 6 mention wars and conflicts as signs of the end. Gog and Magog. Some interpret current conflicts as precursors to prophetic battles described in Ezekiel chapters 38 to 39. Perspectives. Islamic perspectives. In Islamic eschatology, some interpret ongoing conflicts as part of events leading to the arrival of the Mahdi, a messianic figure, and Isa, Jesus, who will bring justice and peace. Secular and historical perspectives. From a secular perspective, the Israel-Palestinian conflict reflects long-standing geopolitical, cultural, and territorial disputes rather than a metaphysical or eschatological event. Historical cycles of conflict and resolution in the region are often seen as part of broader political dynamics rather than signs of an apocalyptic culmination. Key considerations. Prophecy interpretation. Prophecies often rely on symbolic and ambiguous language, leading to varied interpretations. Current events. While impactful and tragic, conflicts in the Middle East have occurred throughout history without necessarily signaling the end of the world. Human agency. Many see these events as opportunities for humanity to strive for peace and reconciliation rather than inevitable steps toward a predetermined end. Whether or not the current situation aligns with notions of last days largely depends on one's faith, interpretive lens, and understanding of prophecy. Is this the last days? The Israel-Palestinian conflict is a long-standing geopolitical and social issue with historical, religious, and cultural roots. While some people interpret events in the Middle East as signs of the last days, based on religious beliefs or scriptural prophecies, others see them as part of an ongoing cycle of conflict and resolution efforts in a politically charged region. Key points to consider. 1. Religious interpretations. In Christianity, many view events in Israel as tied to biblical prophecies about the end times, often citing scriptures like Matthew chapter 24, Ezekiel chapters 38 to 39, or Revelation. In Islam, references to end times also involve events in the Middle East. In Judaism, there are prophecies about a future messianic era involving Israel. Key points to consider. 3. Political realities. The current tensions often stem from disputes over land, self-determination, security, and historical grievances, which are highly charged but not necessarily eschatological. 4. Critical thinking. Viewing events as fulfilling last days prophecies can be a matter of personal faith and interpretation. However, history shows cycles of conflict and resolution, suggesting caution against overly deterministic views. Takeaways. Perspective matters. Whether one sees current events as part of last days depends largely on their worldview and belief system. Constructive actions. For those concerned, focusing on humanitarian efforts, advocacy for peace, and understanding the complex dynamics can have a more immediate and practical impact. Uncertainty and hope. While predictions about the end times have been made throughout history, they often reflect human responses to turmoil rather than definitive markers of cosmic timelines. Israel and Palestinian war. Holy or sinful? The question of whether the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine is holy or sinful is deeply complex, shaped by historical, religious, political, and humanitarian dimensions. Here's an exploration of these perspectives. Religious perspective. Holy. Religious claims. Both Jews and Muslims have deep historical and spiritual ties to the land, particularly Jerusalem, which is sacred to Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Many on both sides view their struggle as divinely justified, believing they are fulfilling religious obligations or protecting sacred sites. Holy context. Some proponents frame their actions or claims within religious narratives, citing scriptures or divine promises. This framing can create a perception of a holy mission. Ethical perspective, sinful, humanitarian crisis. The conflict has resulted in immense suffering, with civilian casualties, displacement, and widespread destruction. Many argue that the loss of innocent lives and the perpetuation of violence are fundamentally immoral and against the teachings of compassion and justice in both religions. Cycle of violence. Critics often view the ongoing aggression and retaliation as sinful because they perpetuate hatred, revenge, and division rather than seeking peace and reconciliation. Political perspective. Power and sovereignty. Beyond religious rhetoric, the conflict is also a struggle for political sovereignty, self-determination, and territorial control. Framing it purely as a religious war oversimplifies the geopolitical and social complexities involved. Instrumentalization of religion. Some argue that religion is used as a tool to justify political aims, which could be seen as manipulative and undermining the true essence of faith. Broader considerations. Moral responsibility. Many religious leaders and ethical thinkers emphasize that peace, justice, and coexistence are core to the teachings of most faiths. The failure to achieve these ideals raises questions about the morality of the actions taken by both sides. Call for peace. Efforts by individuals and groups on both sides to promote understanding, dialogue, and nonviolence reflect a rejection of the notion that the conflict must remain rooted in enmity. Perspective. In conclusion, whether the conflict is seen as holy or sinful depends on one's perspective. It is essential to critically examine the motives, actions, and consequences involved while advocating for justice, peace, and the protection of all human lives. Israel and Palestinian war. Is it good or evil? The ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine is a complex and multifaceted issue with deep historical, political, religious, and social roots. Labeling it as good or evil oversimplifies the situation, which involves decades of competing national aspirations, human rights violations, and profound suffering for both Israelis and Palestinians. Here's a more nuanced perspective. 1. Historical context. The conflict dates back to the early 20th century, with the rise of Jewish and Arab nationalist movements and the British Mandate in Palestine. The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, subsequent wars, and the displacement of Palestinian people have fueled tensions. The occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip following the 1967 Six-Day War remains a central issue. 2. Humanitarian impact. Both Israelis and Palestinians have suffered significant loss of life, trauma, and displacement. The blockade of Gaza, settlement expansion, and acts of violence, including rocket attacks and military strikes, contribute to ongoing suffering. 3. Moral and ethical perspectives. Evil actions. Targeting civilians, acts of terrorism, and disproportionate military responses can be considered morally reprehensible. Such actions violate international humanitarian law. Good intentions. Efforts toward peace, coexistence, and securing safety for citizens can be seen as morally upright. However, these are often overshadowed by violence and political agendas. 4. International involvement. The conflict is shaped by external powers providing political, military, and financial support to both sides. The role of international organizations and countries in mediating peace or exacerbating tensions adds layers of complexity. 5. Path to resolution. Viewing the conflict through a binary, good versus evil, lens hinders understanding and resolution. Efforts to address root causes, uphold human rights, and promote dialogue are essential for sustainable peace. Resolution. The conflict is neither wholly good nor evil. It is a human tragedy with actions and policies that can be judged individually for their morality and impact. Constructive discourse, empathy, and a commitment to justice and equity are needed to move beyond violence and towards a lasting resolution. Israel and Palestinian war. Pros and cons. The Israel-Palestinian conflict is a deeply rooted and highly complex issue that has spanned decades. It encompasses historical, political, religious, and territorial disputes. Analyzing the pros and cons of war in this context requires a sensitive and nuanced approach, as the implications affect millions of lives and have global consequences. Below is a breakdown, framed around broader themes. Pros of military engagement, from various perspectives. 1. Defense and security for Israel. Objective: to neutralize threats from Hamas or other militant groups launching attacks, e.g., rocket strikes or infiltration. Benefit: a strong military response can deter future aggression and protect Israeli citizens. 2. Disruption of militant networks. Targeting key leadership or infrastructure of militant groups could reduce their operational capabilities. Pros of military engagement, from various perspectives. 3. International attention. Military action often garners global attention, potentially sparking international involvement in negotiations or solutions. 4. Reclaiming or securing territory. For both Israelis and Palestinians, military actions might aim to secure contested lands or strategic areas. Cons of military engagement. 1. Loss of civilian lives. High civilian casualties on both sides exacerbate suffering and deepen animosities. Displacement of populations leads to humanitarian crises. 2. Escalation of violence. A cycle of retaliation often follows, prolonging the conflict and increasing destruction. 3. Economic costs. Wars drain national economies through military expenditures and disrupt local economies through destruction. Cons of military engagement. 4. Impact on global relations. International condemnation or strained relations with allies could arise, leading to sanctions or loss of support. 5. Humanitarian crisis. Blockades, destruction of infrastructure, and restricted access to resources harm civilians in Gaza and other affected regions. 6. Radicalization. Military actions can fuel radicalization among younger generations, perpetuating the conflict. Broader context and considerations. 1. Prospects for peace. Military action rarely leads to long-term peace. Diplomatic efforts are generally more sustainable. Peace agreements, such as the Oslo Accords or other negotiated settlements, have had varying degrees of success. Broader context and considerations. 2. International mediation. Global actors like the United Nations, United States, and regional powers could play roles in mediating peace. Prolonged war undermines these efforts and credibility. Broader context and considerations. 3. Historical grievances. Both Israelis and Palestinians have legitimate historical and cultural claims that need acknowledgement in any solution. 4. Public opinion. Polarization of domestic populations often results, with both sides seeing themselves as victims. Conclusion. War in the Israel-Palestinian context often creates more problems than it resolves, with significant humanitarian, economic, and geopolitical costs. Efforts toward a peaceful resolution, based on dialogue, mutual recognition, and compromise, are widely regarded as more viable for long-term stability and coexistence. However, achieving this requires addressing deeply entrenched historical grievances, power imbalances, and external influences. Subscribe, share, like, hit that notification bell for more information. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and share it with your climate change friends and associates. Don't forget to subscribe, like, hit that notification bell for more information on Jesus and climate change every day, week, month, and year. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on the current information. Thank you for watching.